Welcome to the OEMs, Blockers and Breakthroughs podcast, brought to you by Partful. I am your host, Tanya Tran, Partful Head of Marketing. With me is my co-host, Sam Burgess, CEO of Partful. We're here to share real stories from real companies and real people to help OEMs overcome challenges and be amongst those most forward-thinking teams. So thanks, Josh, for coming back to our podcast again. We're so excited to have you back on this episode where we're talking about breaking down silos with real-time integration. In this episode, I'm just going to ask Josh three really simple questions. The first question is, engineering and manufacturing after-sales services are disconnected and siloed. Why do you think that is? The second point of the episode, we'll talk about real-time data updates with an app-to-app integration, which can potentially break down silos. How do you think the integration can be set up to best allow for effective collaboration? And the last point is, integration also maximizes PLM as a data source of truth and distribution center for data across departments within the business. Any PLMs that are good at making this integration accessible to the wider manufacturing community, especially SMBs? So those are three really simple questions. And those three questions are the questions that we're kind of working to solve here at Partful on a daily basis as well. So we're really interested to hear your perspective on those. I recently read your recent blog post around how to avoid migration migraine. Those are really, really great. And I think Sam and I resonated with those points that you make a lot. And I feel like those can be quite good information to complement some of the points that we will discuss as well. So yeah, let's get to it. Why are there silos between engineering and manufacturing after sales?
So thanks, Tanya, Sam, for discussing this topic, because I think it's crucial towards digital transformation to have everything connected, all the data flowing through the organization. And I think the biggest disconnect between engineering, manufacturing, and after-sales services is the historical organization structure. I mean, people were they are arranged by discipline in the organization. You had R&D sometimes. Even you had a secret R&D that provided the information to the sales engineering teams, and they had to prepare something for manufacturing, throw it over the wall, and then manufacture the products, and then throw it out in the field. And oops, then we need service. And nobody thought about it. And then often service becomes a reactive process in the company. And I think also, if you look at the leaders of those divisions in a company, their profit and loss is usually measured on their discipline, not on how well they collaborate. And that's a second issue. I've seen companies that they dream about the horizontal flow of information, but the engineer says, but I'm not going to waste my time spending on analyzing services capabilities. I have to deliver my design as fast as possible with those capabilities that the customer is asking for. And I think there you have two traditional and organizational issues why the connection is not there. And then, of course, historically, also we didn't have the systems that could connect all those sets of data in an easy way, because we created more or less deliverables like PDF drawings that are not designed to be reused in another format than that they were created for the manufacturing purpose. I hope this resonates to your experiences in your customer base, because it's very much legacy and legacy tools that is blocking the change to be connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on a call recently, and a customer used the phrase "the Wild West," which I think is really accurate. You know, they went through a rapid expansion. They were building more and more things. They were under pressure to design, manufacture, and produce more stuff. And with the best intentions, everybody just made up their own, filled in the gaps where they saw gaps. And in that instance, it's quite an extreme example. But I think you can see those examples across pretty much the majority of the customers that we speak to, in that, you know, people try and do what they think is best at the time. And then you then magnify that over like 10 years with all what is now the legacy data. all sorts of things just happen, and just people are just trying to make things work. And I think that's generally what we see in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And often we discuss that it's an SAB issue, the disconnect. I had some years ago a relative big company that I was working with, and they had, if they wanted to deliver a project to the market, they had an MPI process for people coordinated all the efforts to bring it to manufacturing. And then they had a service organization that got all the data thrown over the wall, and they had to service their customer. But there was no connect between what was happening in the field for marketing and services and the R&D designing the products. And they were complete different worlds, and they were not aware of each other's issues.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen that. And also when in larger organizations, when they go through acquisitions and buy up smaller organizations, and they inherit, the challenges that come with that. We spoke to one exceptionally large manufacturer, and they just gone through an acquisition of another similar size organization, and the challenges they inherited were formidable, were absolutely formidable, for the legacy data. It was incredible.
Exactly, and I think everyone has to calculate in its future roadmap that there will be mergers, acquisitions. You never will live alone for the next 20 years. I mean,
yeah. I wonder. This is just a thing that's come to my mind. Within due diligence, I wonder how much due diligence is done on legacy data. Because I actually don't think anything is done really currently. I think they take things at face value, and I wonder if from a finance perspective, if people understood the challenges within the legacy data more, that would absolutely affect some decisions within the due diligence process for sure.
Exactly. I would say the legacy is the big elephant in all discussions. We always to look forward to what we could do, but we never find a way to discuss also what do we have and how do we get there.
It would be interesting, not just from the scenarios that we're talking, but also investors would be very interested in understanding the value of legacy data. That would be a very interesting, if you quantify what that is. So, even on a scale of 10, with a 10 being everything is digital, everything is connected, everything is integrated, and 1 being, is paper-based.
Yeah.
And actually, you could then work out what a value of your legacy data is, because if you're a 10, then the ability to unlock and monetize that data is significant.
Yeah.
But if you're 1, the ability to monetize that data is very challenging.
Right.
I wonder, speaking of legacy data, when I read your blog, Joss, I feel like the legacy data might be the consequence of the dark data phenomenon. Am I correct here?
Oh yeah, historically we always created data not for sharing with the whole organization, but only for sharing with a certain purpose to the next goal, I would say. That was also, especially in SMBs, we knew that we had to come to you for this question, so we didn't take care also much about discovery of data. We knew the person that could give the answer. And those two aspects are changing. People are retiring, the old generation of engineers, and the new ways of working are not yet implemented. The dark data is probably getting bigger at the moment than before.
It's interesting because going back to the point where all of this are kind of like byproducts of siloed departments within the manufacturing business. Sam put out a poll 4 weeks ago to ask people why different teams are siloed within the manufacturing business. And it seems like 70% of the people who voted on the poll said that is because there was no integration between the systems or the tech tools that they use. And I feel like it coincides with the point that you made on the blog around there are different wars between the departments where the only transaction of data is Excel sheets or PDFs.
Right.
So yeah, it's very much similar to how we see our customers working or are working or operating within their organizations at the moment. So I'd like to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so especially if you also look at the type of people, if we do job interviews, we look for specialists in a certain area. So more or less, we are looking for silos. And if you see what are the best functioning people in organizations, that are the people with what we call the T-shape. They are specialists, but they are very well in connecting all the information in context. And Historically, the T-shaped people were the firefighters in the company. They had the knowledge and to combine information. Now with digitalization, we can serve those information requests from the T-shaped people by having tools and apps that provide dashboards or information so that they can make decisions outside their vertical scope. And it's an important trend because I still see very good T-shaped people that can do a lot of things, but they're not hired because they're not the exact specialist they are looking for.
That is so accurate. I don't know if I've said this before. Tanya knows this story. When I worked for a vehicle manufacturer for a while, I was running the after-sales department, and we used to get frustrated with the engineers not designing things as we felt correctly, and therefore when they were breaking, we as the after-sales department were the guys who were speaking to the customers and getting our ear bent because something broke or something wasn't as reliable as it should be. So we set a program up where we took engineers and they went on a cycle. It was about, I think it was 2, maybe 3 months. They spent 2 or 3 months in the after sales department as a after sales engineer, and the change that had within the engineering department was incredible because they just did not appreciate the realities of our world, of what it's like to support things. And as engineers, while some of them were hobbyist mechanics and enthusiasts within the automotive driving world, they had no real experience as to what our customers were, how they were using the vehicles. So by giving them that insight and rotating them through on a 2 or 3 month cycle, whatever it was, we suddenly were able to create a whole bunch of, as you call them, those T people, because we were subjecting them to a generalist skill set that they just didn't even know existed, and it had an incredibly powerful effect across the whole organization. It actually made the teams work a lot better as well. No longer was it them and us. It was, it almost became it wasn't quite, but it almost became one happy team.
Right. And in that context, I have similar experiences when I do interviews with companies in the first step in order to get the kind of understanding of what is the issue. I usually do the interviews with different disciplines, and I always start with after sales and service or the customer side, because working upstream, you learn where are the gaps, where is the information missing or blocking. Where if you start from the other side, everything is ideal. I mean, everyone is pushing it in the right direction, but they don't see the result. And it's a best practice I had over the 20 years. Start at the end and discover what is missing, and then try to solve that. It's the flow of information that is needed.
100%. I say this all the time on demos. We're a data company. We just hide behind immersive technology. We are. That's the sex and the sizzle that people buy into. But ultimately, we're a data business.
Yeah.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. So, say an engineering director is on a mission to hire talent for his team. Most director of engineering would tend to hire really great specialists in design engineering. How would you change my mind in terms of, prioritizing someone with a T-shaped kind of skill set over someone who's really great at designing?
Well, I think it's both. I would hire the bright engineer first of all, but I would make sure that in my education or when he comes in the company, he gets also horizontal. If he's too vertical, and I have some examples from the past where people sometimes said this guy can only talk in software code, he cannot even communicate in daily language. Okay, then he might be an excellent software guy, but then I would not hire him. I mean, part of the hiring process is also how do people connect to the outside world. But still, I would aim for the highest skilled person if you can find them. I mean, that's also one of the challenges.
Yeah, I guess that the T-shape could be a soft skill kind of discipline. It's also around like personality and ways of working and how that person communicate and interact with different teams. Do you think that can be trained after that person joins the team, or?
Life is continuous learning. I mean, and if you hire somebody, this person has to adapt to your organization. So if your organization is pushing people in silos and doesn't see the value of a horizontal connection, and this can be the type of management style, then this person will end up in a silo. If people start to say it's not my job to talk with you on this topic, yeah, then you stay in your silo.
There's a really, really good example of this, and Joss, I think you might really appreciate this. So back in I think it was maybe the 80s, the Dutch football team came up with the concept of total football, and that was where every person on the pitch could play in everybody else's position, and it revolutionised football because suddenly you didn't just have strikers that just stayed up front and just waited for someone to kick the ball. A striker could also defend and run back and tackle, and that concept of total football really changed the game, and it propelled the Dutch team back in was it the 80s or the 90s? I forget.
It was 1974 with Johan Cruyff as the center of gravity and talent.
Yeah. And they were the biggest team in the world at that time, and that same principle could be applied to the scenario that we've said. If we had like a total engineering where engineers were able to understand and appreciate, they weren't just designing things; they could also then pick up a phone and speak to a customer. I mean, that is the dream right there.
Exactly, and I think this is where we are. Thanks to technology, we can connect to everyone. Huh? We are much better connected than 20 years ago.
Amazing segue there into the next point. I think in the tech world, we'd like to believe that technology can help somewhat aid breaking down that silo, the departments, connections with real-time integration. So I don't think it takes away the human interaction that's needed in order to collaborate better or create a culture of teamwork. The real-time integration aids that by taking away the manual admin, the wars of Excel sheets and CAD and PDFs and things like that. And in the SaaS world, we call that app-to-app integration, which can be no-code integration. It's easy to set up. You don't need a software engineer in the organization in order to do that. But it's a very kind of new age SaaS as opposed to a lot of the old school kind of PDM or PLM systems, which I think I resonated a lot with some of the points you made in the last blog post as well around migration and the problems with PLMs and PDMs is that there's kind of a diverse or a varied way of data structure within this system where it could be object based, it could be relational based. And can you explain that a little bit and how that can impact kind of this easy app to app integration in the SaaS world?
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest migrations issues came, as you said, it came from relational databases to object oriented. I mean, that's where, the relational databases, they were designed by IT people, not necessarily with a business focus. They just wanted to have the right results on the screen if you select this function. And where the data was stored in the relational databases, that was all optimized for performance. But for example, document data or item data was all in the same table. But it's the application and the knowledge in the application that makes the result. When we go to the app-to-app integration, then the data is leading. Our focus is on just getting the data or seeing the data or manipulating the data. It's not anymore about the system that is leading. And that's a big change from the traditional ways of working and the legacy systems and the new ways of working, because the legacy systems have their own data formats, their data models, and when they are object oriented, then at least they become better understandable and better accessible, because then you know this is a part, this is a document, this is a project task or an issue, and then it's much easier mapping than to relational databases. We don't have yet, I would say, a full global data model of everything. The United Nations has this kind of typology, but that's too generic for our world.
I feel like that's it. There's no kind of global or universal way of data structuring or organization within this legacy systems, which could lead to the difficulty in app-to-app integration or setting up app-to-app integrations with the new age SaaS. I think our team here, like Sam could attest to this as well, we're working really hard on building integration with different PLM systems. And we could see the difficulty, the more we discover, the more like mess we discover at the same time.
Yeah.
because every customer uses their PLM and PDM systems in their own way, and they structure their data their own way. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, the issue started with SAP. They called it a physical part, they called it a material. Because for them it was a material that they had to purchase or to but by not making a differentiation between what is a part and what is a material but by just calling everything material, that's where already the legacy started. And SAP was of course one of the first IT systems in many companies. And
Yeah.
then part, item, all those different definitions. And for that you see we create ontologies, and we start mapping data between the systems, where historically again master data management became this kind of external exercise to map all the different data types that are similar. But you don't want to have an additional system. You want the data to be connected directly, and that's the modern SaaS approach also, not adding another system for master data management.
It's funny you said that. As soon as you said about the SAP and the material, I remember doing a SAP integration in maybe, I don't know, it was like late 2000s, and everything was material, and it just caused just the unbelievable amount of confusion because everything was the same then, but it obviously wasn't. I remember that.
The early 2000s, eh?
Yeah, about that time, because I was responsible for the methodology with Smart Team, and there I had a clear lecture on what is a material and what is a part, and you can make a part based on materials.
Yeah.
They're not the same components.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we talk about PLMs and PDMs, we tend to think of some really like established big brother brands out there, such as like Team Center, Siemens Team Center, or PTC Windchill, SolidWorks PDM, Dassault Systems. I had a kind of a LinkedIn conversation with Adam, Colab Software Adam, CEO. It was a really interesting conversation because he was talking about the kind of the integration between the new age SaaS with the kind of the PLMs and the PDMs and kind of the legacy systems, and we're breaking new frontier and trying to push the boundaries a little bit, but it's still difficult because of these legacy ways of structuring the data. But we got into a conversation around if those are the weaknesses of legacy PLM, PDM, and ERP systems, there might be room for the new age SaaS PLM, PDM, and ERP system to kind of rise and fill that gap for like SMBs. What do you think about that?
Yeah, in the beginning, maybe I have thought that also that there could be a miracle that solves it. But I think the legacy is there, and the legacy is big. And even in our forward-looking mindset with the new technologies and the possibilities, companies are 10, 20 years behind in their ways of working. And that's because they have been doing their job and not being IT minded or specialists in new architectures. So I think if you want to be in this business, it has to be evolutionary path. And that means the legacy PLM systems will be there for the next 10, 20, maybe 30 years, depending on the industry. But you can work on, and that's where we discussed maybe the previous time also about your systems of engagement. The environments where data is created, they can be modernized, they can be upgraded, more flexible. And as long as they publish the data in an accessible way back in the legacy PLM systems, also the legacy PLM data gets improved. I mean, I had a company that is just recently starting to implement one of those major PLM systems. Before they were fragmented, and they said, well, now we're going to do the coordinated approach from you. Aren't we? Why not directly data? And you can, of course, have this mixed environment. You don't have to do everything as PDFs. You can make the data accessible also to others, but it's an implementation choice. And then coming back to your questions, are there these flexible PLMs? When I worked for Smart Team, our sales message was, we work the way you work, which means you could customize the system like crazy. And I was training a lot of resellers from IBM and so at that time. And then the things like crazy came up. I mean, people could do crazy things and there was no thinking. So an easy customizable tool doesn't mean that it's going to be working in the right way and also for the long term, because there might be a magician in your company that can program the craziest thing, and then he's gone, and nobody understands what's happening. So flexibility always has the downside that if you create something very specific for that need at that moment, it might become obsolete, and your new legacy. And especially in the SMBs, I would say they don't have an IT staff. And here I see that even some of the SMBs now, they are very happy that they can have something hosted on the cloud, because it also reduces their security and IT staff just to manage their own data. So I think the future, everyone is aware, it needs to be a SaaS type of solution. And of course, the other aspect is how easy can I access the data? I mean, that would be one of the criteria. If your solution, even if it's the SaaS solution, not open for connecting to other systems, yeah, then you are on the right path. On the wrong path, sorry. You're on the right path maybe for your sales for a while, but because your tool does something, but you have to think connected. And there fits the framework from federated PLM, I think, with the systems of record and systems of engagement very nicely.
It's just challenging. It's just challenging. We see this all the time. There's a customer that we're working with. They had a significant member of staff leave. He'd also been there a long time. So not only was this person responsible for a very important component part of the business, he had a huge amount of stuff in his head as well. So when he left, it really did have a significant impact on the organization. And as technology progresses, that risk will get less and less. But because we're going through still this transition of digitization, and this guy was in there before digitization, and he's been part of the digitization process. They're significant points of failure, like really significant points of failure, can really affect a business, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the risk in SMB is even bigger because their knowledgeable staff in a certain area is much smaller. I mean, the chances that somebody is working quite isolated is much bigger than in a larger organization where you have a team doing the same job.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this guy was SMB for sure. And
One thing I think I can compare between, say, the sales and marketing technology sector with this kind of manufacturing sector is that early 2000 we've got Salesforce coming into the picture. They grew really, really fast, and they've become the biggest kind of sales tech, operational technology, software platform, whatever you want to call them, on the market because of their kind of like hybrid SaaS structure plus the customization side of it. Right. So every time you think about an organization using Salesforce, a lot of the times those organizations will have to hire someone to set up the Salesforce for them in the right way. So there's a bit of a barrier to entry in terms of how you can start using Salesforce and maximize Salesforce in the best possible way. You need expertise in that. And then with that, it leaves a really big hole on the market around SMBs not being able to afford that kind of expertise. So you start to see technologies like HubSpot, Pipedrive, Soho CRM coming into play, those smaller, more rigid, structured CRMs coming into play, but really easy to use and easy to integrate into. And you don't really need someone with like HubSpot expertise. Like anyone can start using and learn how to use it. So with our customer base, we start to see like smaller and like medium businesses or even startups or younger organizations coming into the picture with really new SaaS ERP systems. So we've started to see names like Zupa. We started to see names like Papaya, coming into the picture, even though those ERPs are still quite small, hold like smaller market share on the market compared to SAP or NetSuite, but we're starting to see those like coming into play.
Yeah, and exactly the point why people choose SAP, it's also no risk for your career most of the time. I mean, it's a well-known brand. It has been proven for big companies over the years, and every new ERP you select, it's a risk. And to be honest, some of the very promising PLMs I've seen, they're gone. Or they were a startup, they had a very nice, different approach. But if you don't find the customer base that trusts that this is the right way to go forward, then you don't scale, and then they choose again for what everyone is choosing. So being a market leader is, for me, not always the criteria to select a system.
Yeah, as a founder of a tech company, I would agree wholeheartedly with
Yeah.
that.
Otherwise, we would always stay in the status quo of doing the
Yeah.
old things in the old way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've learned a huge amount around this about the level of innovation that organizations like ourselves and others have gone through. And there are manufacturers who are in a similar boat, that they have to be competitive. They've got to think outside the box in order for their businesses to grow. And for us, really identifying those partners is really important, because there are some businesses that, for whatever reason, they would just never go with us because we're not that that staple. We don't have a Siemens name, for example. But then there are some people that would go with us because we're not Siemens, and it's a really interesting dynamic that we see play out constantly, really. And
I think it comes down to us knowing there's a gap on the market around needing a intuitive, easy to use, foolproof software where anyone can adopt and take on and start using at an affordable, lower barrier to entry, which I think SAP or any other tools out there can leave that gap and not be able to serve these kind of like segments on the market.
I mean, nobody selected SAP for its usability or by having a demo and then they say this is what we want. And exactly what you say, this kind of tools that are user friendly, the systems of engagement. I mean, they are the front end to the end user, and they need to be as easy and nice as possible. Still, as we started in the first question, you need to have your connection to your legacy, and that's where probably the old PLM system still will remain in the background. They won't be replaced very fast.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a really nice quote that you said earlier, Joss, that I want to bring back. And also, I think, Sam, you've said this many times as well, is you need to take a leap of faith and go for new things. Otherwise, you're never going to change the status quo. If there's one thing that you would like to give to the SMB OEMs out there, what's the one thing that you want to say, Joss?
Yeah, I don't know if I said it before, but the most important thing in our business is learn storytelling. Learn to make those complex things, the technology where you are maybe very interested in day to day, make it translated into a story that has a business focus, because that's where the decisions are taken on business level. And if you cannot address the business focus, but you say, we are the best SaaS company, we have the best integration. If I'm at the C level, I trust everyone says this. So, but I want to see what it does for my business and what is the opportunity that I'm missing. So keep on talking business and simple stories that motivate people to change, not creating fear.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Tanya, I was going to just add on to that. I think, you create those simple stories, and I think that's how you get to your total engineering. Going back to that total engineering concept is that, you get people's buy-in in order to want to be, that want to play those roles. And I actually think that's a really powerful message to end on, actually.
Amazing. That's great. Anything else? You wanted to say something, Joss?
No, I see you are on the track on talking business in your communication, which is very good. So
Glad to hear that. Good to hear some validation. Yeah. Thank you. If you want to check out Joss's perspective on a lot of the topics in manufacturing and engineering, head to Virtual Dutchman. He also shares a lot of content on LinkedIn as well. Follow Sam's LinkedIn. He shares a lot of perspective and thoughts from a veteran after-sales engineer in vehicle manufacturing to now CEO, founder of a tech company trying to solve that very same problem. And thank you very much, both, and especially Joss, for joining this morning. And we wish you a very, very nice weekend.
Great stuff.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joss.